Okay, session is on recording now. So today we are going to do teaching productive skills, and for this I have selected 17th chapter from Jeremy Harmer's third edition. Okay, now what are these productive skills? There are 4 skills. 2 are receptive that we have already done, and there are 2 productive skills, right? Now in these productive skills we have speaking and we have writing. Okay, the output, actually these are the output skills through which you produce the language. Okay, either through speaking or through writing, both. Now what you're supposed to do, what we are going to learn in this chapter and this section, how can you teach these 2 productive skills? Okay, so what aspects of language you need to teach to the students. Before we begin with teaching of these productive skills, please be very clear in the mind, and we are going to look at this later on in the lecture, that practicing grammar in the classroom, okay, whether you are doing it in writing, through written activities, like giving students 10 sentences to change the tenses, active to passive, direct to indirect, or you're teaching them prepositions to fill in the blanks, or you are asking them to repeat structures after you, such as in the audiolingual method we saw. These do not come in teaching of productive skills. Okay? Because what's the reason that these segregated teaching of the language do not come in teaching of productive skills is that the goal of teaching productive skill is communication. Okay, so when you are teaching your students a language through segregated sentences or through isolated examples, that means you might be giving them practice of aspects of the language, but as we have already done through the methods, that this does not result in communicative competence. So the end and the goal of teaching these productive skills should be communication. Okay, they should be communicative enough. So that is why when you will be teaching productive skills, you would not be teaching them structures. Okay, you would not be focusing on grammar, despite the fact, of course, grammar is an integral part of language. Okay, so what does it mean when we are not teaching grammar and structures of the language? That means that these productive skills are taught at a little advanced level when the students are already acquainted with certain essential structures and they somehow know the language. Okay, for instance, when we teach creative writing, of course that can be taught to the students who already know the language. If someone doesn't know the language, how can you make them creative in the language? Okay. Why is computer science class here? Aisha Afzal and Adila Mehdi. I think it's Tuesday today, if I'm not mistaken. It's not your class, guys. You may leave. Isn't it Tuesday? I guess it's Tuesday. Anyway, right? So what I was telling you is that these productive skills are basically taught at a little advanced level when you know that the students are well acquainted with the structures and they know the language. Okay. Okay. So now, having said that, let's see what can you teach How would you teach it specifically? We are going to move to the activities later on, but right now we are treating these productive skills of writing and speaking together. The first thing is you need to tell them about the discourse structure. Now, when we talk about discourse, we mean something that is beyond a sentence, as simple as that. But a writing or speech with a context is a discourse. Okay. And of course, a discourse does not consist of scattered or random sentences, right? So the thing that you need to teach your student is how to structure discourse. When we talk about structuring of discourse, we refer to two aspects of discourse, okay? You probably, we have been referring to those two characteristics and two aspects, and probably if you have done discourse analysis as a separate course, you should remember there are two things in discourse. One is cohesion, the other is coherence. Okay. So when we are talking about the structuring of discourse, cohesion becomes more important, right? So how do you define cohesion? That's a question I keep on asking, but quickly, how would you define? The first thing that you are going to teach your students is cohesion. Okay. What is cohesion? Okay, I'm waiting for your quick answers and then we will continue. Cohesion and coherence. Anyone? Action of forming. Okay, Huma, I don't know if you've given me a definition that you understand, but I think we have differentiated between cohesion and coherence a number of times. Anyway, if you do not know, I'm repeating it. I thought we have done this and we have referred to this a number of times. Now, cohesion refers to linking of grammatical items. Okay, that is how do you structure the sentences. And coherence refers to linking of ideas so that your writing is not haphazard. Ideas follow in a particular sequence, right? So these are two important aspects of discourse that are needed to be taught to the students, right? So basically, you can, it's here also, but what I would like you to refer to here is cohesion is, technical matter because it deals with connecting of grammatical links. It is about grammatical links basically, okay, or linking of grammatical items. So that's a technical part, right? So, and whenever students are being taught grammar in isolation, eventually for the purpose of teaching them cohesion, okay? But when they are structuring their discourse, it is very important that it is grammatically correct, right? So that is why cohesion is said to be the technical part of any discourse, right? So there we need to concentrate on various linguistic ways of connecting these phrases and sentences. Whereas coherent writing refers to connecting ideas, and that writing makes sense, okay? because there you can follow the sequence of ideas and points. Okay. Now, cohesion is a must. Okay, whether it's writing or it's speaking, in both of the productive skills. But when it comes to coherence, sometimes the speech is not too coherent. Okay, people can, just do not talk on one topic. They can, move from one topic and then come back to the first topic, and that is quite acceptable because speech is spontaneous. But when it comes to writing, coherence becomes very important. Okay, and when you are teaching your students productive skills, especially writing, then you have to pay attention to coherence as well. Okay, so in cohesion, what your students need to know are the anaphoric and cataphoric references. Do you know about cataphoric, anaphoric references? References through the pronouns. Okay, anyone who knows about cataphoric, anaphoric references, you probably must have done these. These are some of the elements of, cohesion, and these are also called as cohesive devices. Guys, anyway, so basically, since we have talked about cohesion as a more technical matter, so in that, where we can have chain of references like anaphoric and cataphoric references, and these references make use of pronouns. Okay. Please find out, if you do not know, what's the difference between anaphoric and cataphoric reference for your further understanding. Okay, I'll ask you next time. So other than that, there can be incohesion. We are talking about cohesive devices, so there can be lexical repetition, there can be synonymy, and there can be linkers, right? For addition, also, moreover, contrast, although, however, still, then there can be cause and effect, therefore, so, and time, then, afterwards. All these linkers are a part of cohesion. These make up cohesive devices. Okay. So I told you that there is a difference between teaching of written skills and writing skills and speaking skills, right? When it comes to speaking, we are not really vigilant about the accuracy as far as the cohesion is concerned, or sometimes coherence as well. So the speech is spontaneous and maybe cohetic, maybe it is disorganized sometimes, but this is not the case with the other productive skills as writing. Okay, and the language of speech is usually the informal one, right? It may use easier vocabulary, simpler structure. That really depends on the audience as well. We're going to talk about audience analysis later on, but teaching of writing skills is about teaching of formal language. Okay, so the speakers, when they are speaking, they may employ a number of structuring devices, and they can, buy time. There can be pauses, there can be silence, and then they have to take care of the turn taking, right? And they can use such markers as firstly, secondly, right? All of these. Okay. So what we come to know from structuring discourse, that there is a difference between teaching of both the productive skills, writing and speaking. Okay. So we would be doing different activities related to speaking and writing later on, once we are done with the theoretical part. But what you need to teach your student are these two things: cohesion and coherence. When you are teaching them productive skills, your focus might be different, because writing is more accurate, okay? Speaking needs to be more fluent. So there's a difference between fluency and accuracy, okay? Because speech is spontaneous, and people might not get a chance to redo that, okay, once their turn is over. But when it comes to writing, people might be writing one draft after another, and making it still better, right? So that's why there's a difference between teaching of the two skills, okay? But whatever this is, the goal of teaching productive skill is, of course, communication, okay, to make the students communicatively competent, right? And these skills are basically taught for real purposes, okay, for everyday communication also, and written communication for your emails, if you're writing a complaint, if you're writing a formal letter, application, whatever genre you choose. So you need to teach your student different kind of styles, and according to the genre of what you are teaching them. Now, before moving to the rules, I would like to ask you, how many of you have got the introduction of teaching of productive skills, what I have told you in the last 10 minutes? Just raise your hands. Are you following? How many of you are following? Okay, that's good. Right, you're there. I was just checking on you if you're really there, because I wasn't getting any answers in writing from the chat section. That's good. Other people, please try to understand that we are doing two skills today, just the theoretical part. These are called as productive skills, and we would be talking about writing and speaking, okay? We have already talked about the receptive skills, which were, of course, also two. That were listening and reading, okay? Now, let's come to, following the rules. The rules of using the language, they change with the context, okay? There can be the cultural impact in the use of language, and there can be the impact of linguistic background of people who are, using the language. And as far as speaking is concerned, these are the rules of conversation, okay, in their language and the culture that they share. You must have seen, if I give you an example, that we speak English as a second language, but still, if all the conversation after greeting takes place in English, the greeting is still our culture dependent, okay? Seldom you would say hi and hello to your friends when you meet them, but after your culture greeting, then you can, of course, switch to using that second language, okay? So also, when you write to each other, you would follow these conventions, right? So the rules, the strict grammatical rules of the language might be written. You can read them, okay? You can teach them to your students. But since English language, if you talk about in particular, is being used, is being spoken, and is being written, and is being learned as a second and a foreign language in many countries other than the native countries, right? So there is a culture element to the use of language, and you need to transfer that to your students. Okay. And therefore, there have been debates and there have been research, and I've read certain theses also, that English in Pakistan is taught out of context, right? For instance, this streamline that is taught in language centers depicts American culture, basically. Okay. When we are teaching our kids about animals, we teach them about animals that they have never seen, because those are not actually found in Pakistan. So we keep showing them pictures, we talk about them, we talk about their habitat, about their food and everything, but that is not really realistic. You cannot actually show those animals to the children. Other than that, the better example of teaching of language out of context, out of culture context, is these books, right? Because they are taken from another culture and teachers trying to teach students something that they have not experienced, right? So these are some conventional rules that speakers need to follow. Okay. For instance, the number of relations or the address terms in English are lesser than in our own language, right? And then it is very conventional. How would you talk to your elders? How would you address them? Okay. For instance, in America, people might take a name of their teachers, right? Of their elders, of their seniors. But in our culture, this is not really acceptable, right? So we can use their language, but we have to take care of some of the rules. For instance, the socioculture rules, right? So this is sometimes you need to teach the students, sometimes the students already know because they are growing in that particular culture. They brought up is in that particular culture, so they already know, so they can mix and match the language and their culture conventions. Okay. So what are the rules that you need to refer to sometimes to your students in order to teach them language in context? Okay. So one of the rules is called as socioculture rules, right? And this comes as people grow up in a particular culture. They share a culture background and they know how to speak to each other in terms of how formal to be. Like you need to be formal with your elders, you need to be formal with your teachers, what kind of language they can use, how loud to speak or how close to stand to each other, right? You will not follow the native culture while you are teaching your students English in their classrooms. Okay, so for a good teaching of English, you as teachers of English language should take care of the cultural background also. Okay, so their proxemics, their kinesics, their nonverbal communication might be different from our nonverbal communication, right? Like we do not shake hands with everyone, okay? And then we are not supposed to be loud in front of people. This proximity is different in different cultures, right? So these are shared cultural habits, and students would learn a language better if they can, have their own cultural rules. So see, now socioculture rules also determine the gender roles and conversation between genders and conversation among genders, right? So it determines how women and men would speak to each other in different societies, how conversations are framed when the participants are of different social or professional status. And this guides behavior in a number of well-recognized speech events like invitation and socializing moves, and when we are negotiating. Okay, you probably have seen the invitation cards. They are in English, but a lot of things are cultural as well. Okay, the greetings, the script, and the events that are mentioned, all of those, they make use of English language, but they are embedded in their particular cultures. Okay. Now, these rules might change also. These are not really fixed rules. Socioculture rules for using the language are not exactly fixed. They keep on changing, okay? Because the culture also change, right? So these rules change because the habit and the culture also changes. And at any given movement, they exist in public consciousness, so that obeying them or purposely flouting them becomes act of belonging or rejection. They keep on changing, and they are taught accordingly. And people keep on following, and they are being judged whether they are obeying their rules or they are flouting them. Okay. We also know that learning a language is encouraged. Learning English language is encouraged, but leaving your own culture is not. Okay, so this is you need to teach your students. These are two different things when you're learning English in another country of non-native speakers, right? Now, these rules of turn taking are also different in different cultures. Okay, so in our culture, it would be different who would speak. Who would speak first? Who would keep the floor occupied for more time? Who has the right for the turn? Okay, so this can be different as well. And when you are giving the turn to someone to speak, how do you signal that you have finished and the other person can speak? So the turn taking also comes in conventional rules, and it might be different from the native people. Okay. Now, sometimes, the rules of writing are also different. So, these netiquettes who use the internet, they have different rules which are acceptable. Okay. When you are writing an SMS, right, you can use short words, like instead of WOU, you use U. And that is very much acceptable in the world of internet. But when it comes to writing a formal email, where email is also a part of your internet, and you need to write it to your teacher or someone who's not close to you, and you need to be formal, then you cannot use these short forms. Okay, this comes in flouting of the rules, conventional rules basically. Otherwise, if you write an email, like instead of writing WE, you write only alphabet V. Instead of writing YOU, you just write alphabet U. For instance, if I receive such an email, of course, the meaning, I can make out the meaning, but it does not look nice. Because it flouts the conventional rules. Okay. It makes your writing very informal, which is not acceptable, right? So writing down SMS, commenting on people's posts on Instagram or Facebook, or using your Twitter accounts, such language is acceptable. Even if you are commenting on a post of someone senior to you, someone elder to you, in that specific context, in that specific space, the rules for writing change. Okay, people do not usually mind. But again, when it comes to emailing someone, because email has taken the place of formal communication basically. Okay, if you want to submit an application, the format of the application would remain the same, but the channel would change only. Dina, I don't think there are any girls. I just received your message in the chat that there are some girls. No, there are no girls, I think. Okay. So what I was telling you that all of these need to be taught to the students. Okay. It's just not giving them exercises for writing, but it is very important to teach them the rules also. Okay. If you're teaching them writing skills, so you need to teach them the writing rules as well. In what space, what would be acceptable, and in which context, what would not be acceptable, would be considered as flouting, and maybe, people would mind that. Okay. And I've given you example of the same, right? So when as teachers of English, you are teaching them some skills, teaching them how to write coherent or how to produce a coherent and a cohesive discourse is one thing, but you need to tell them the genres also, and that is part of the skill, how they are negotiating the rules successfully. Okay, how are they doing it while they are writing to someone or they are speaking to someone. Okay, because I told you that British and the American rules might not be applied as we are speaking, the way we are doing the turn takings, and the way we are writing. Okay, so these are some of the conventional rules that need to be taught to the students, apart from teaching them the language. Okay, so it becomes a little tricky when you're teaching a foreign language within your own culture context, but that's important. Okay, so let's come to different styles and different genres. So this basically comes in socioculture rules, that there can be different styles, and they can be different written and spoken genres. Okay, so now some of the things that you need to take care of while you are teaching how to write in different styles, while you are doing different genres, is you need to look at these parameters. The setting. Okay, the setting is, I already told you, that's an umbrella term, and it refers to the physical setting. Now, physical setting can be your classrooms, the offices, your home. All these are physical settings. Okay, then in settings you also have the participants. Okay, your relationship with the participants, whom you're talking to, who you're writing to, the channel you use for communication. There are a number of channels, whether you are on your cell phone, you're calling them, you are sending them an SMS, you are sending them a message to WhatsApp, you're commenting on their Facebook post. So all of these, and these channels have increased over time. There were a number of channels of communication. Previously, it was only through, post office or maybe the landlines, but these have increased immensely, right? So which channel would you use for a certain type of communication, right? For instance, email comes in formal styles, okay? But these SMS and WhatsApp do not, okay? So if I have to inform you for the class, I can, informally inform you because I want a very simple thing to be done. Okay, but when I am informing about my class, that I will have a class to any of my seniors, or maybe to the registrar or to the VC or to the dean, then I would email them that at this time I will have my class, right? So see, the style changes as the genre has changed. Okay, so that's about, I would never, if it's like I have some formal kind of relationship or a working relationship at my workplace with someone, I would definitely would not send them any information through SMS, or any formal information through SMS or through WhatsApp. WhatsApp and SMS are informal channels, basically, that you that support your informal styles. Okay, so you need to see the settings and the channels that I have named, and the type of communication, the genres. Okay, it can be an interview, it can be a telephonic conversation, a meeting. In writing, you can have applications, you can have memorandum writing, you can have informal letter writing, and you can have formal letter writing. So you need to determine what it is, right? Now, if, for instance, there is an example given of a lecture, right? So this lecture classroom or lecture theater is the setting, and the channel is the microphone. Okay, right now also I'm talking to you through the microphone, right? So this is the genre. Okay, lecture is the genre. Lecture is the kind of communication or the type of communication that is going on. So the lecture becomes a genre, and the microphone becomes a channel, right? And the purpose, is formal communication. Okay, so it would come with typical pattern of rhetorics and organizations, and this genre will determine the style of language, right? So in lectures, the language would be formal. In lectures, the language would be technical, right? For instance, I defined the discourse for you. We are talking about genres, we are talking about productive skills, we are talking about styles. So all of these are certain technical terms which are part of linguistics. Okay, so what you need to teach your students are the different styles and the different genres and the kind of language that they can use. And this is also a skill. And if you have taught your students only writing and speaking, which is a matter of discussion when it comes to teaching of English in Pakistan, most of the time our spoken language is reflected in our written expression as well. We seldom differentiate between the spoken language and the written language. Okay, if a student is usually it happens, and there have been rare cases where we found that the students were very fluent in their speech, but they were not good writers when it came to writing their term papers. Okay, seldom it happens, but usually students who are fluent in the language, they write better also, because the teaching of English is such here that teachers do not differentiate between the language used for speech and the language that is used for writing. So oftentimes when we look at, or when we read the papers of the students, so it is more like that the language of that is used for speech. Okay, so they just use the same language in the writing also. But these are two different things, and this is a skill that you need to teach your students: the genres and the styles, the channel, and how it varies and changes according to the settings. Okay, so different kind of a language, when writing the same information in a particular magazine, genre, right? Writing in a magazine is a genre. When exchanging emails on the subject with a close colleague, our use of language will almost certainly be very, very different. Okay. So basically we differentiate between formal and in broader terms, we differentiate between formal use of the language and the informal use of the language, right? And the use of both depends on the genre. These are styles, formal and informal. And that really depends on which genre, in which genre we are trying to use that language. Okay. And then formality and informality lies in a spectrum. Okay. So it's just not that there are two absolutely opposite uses of the language, like the formal use and the informal use. It comes in a continuum. Okay, it's a spectrum. They can be very formal language, then they can be less formal language, then they can be least formal language, which moves on to informal language. Okay, so there can be levels of formality, right? And that really depends on your level of intimacy, how close or how distant you are to the person you are speaking to or writing to. Okay, you're more formal with the strangers and you're less formal with your friends or people that you already know or you're acquainted with. So a feeling of distance will make the use of well-formed sentences in writing a priority. Okay, so you make draft and you reread it when you are preparing for a discourse, which is formal. Okay, you will write in full sentences. Okay, and when it comes to someone who is close to you, you might be leaving. You might be leaving sentences incomplete. You might write in ellipses. Okay, there might not be any punctuations, right? You can add emojis to it. So the writing would change according to the settings, according to the context, basically. So meaning thereby that you need to teach your students this skill as well, how to vary or how to change the use of language according to the context, according to settings, okay, according to the participants, according to the physical settings, according to the purpose even, right? So we use two terms, distance and closeness, are not the same as writing and speaking. However, people sometimes write closely in media, such as postcards, emails, and notes left around the house. They can speak more distantly in speeches, formal interviews, and prescribed ceremonies. Now, speaking language that is used for speaking almost becomes similar to the language in writing when it comes to formal speeches. For instance, interviews. For instance, there are some formal ceremonies. So your spoken language becomes equivalent to your written language. Okay. And then we say writing like, speaking like. Okay. When the language is informal, we say that it is speaking like. When the language is formal, we say it is writing like. But speaking language can be writing like when you are delivering a lecture, you are in an official ceremony, or you are giving an interview, or you're taking an interview, all of this. Okay. So for this, students need practice in different genres and in different styles, right? And that needs to, it needs a certain level of grammar, vocabulary, which is also called as lexis, and the functions. Okay, so you need to select books that have these activities related to the context or related to the settings, so that you can teach your students difference between genres and style and different varied use of language in different situations. Okay, and if you don't get hold of such books, otherwise there are genre based activities book also, right? So you need to create those, right? And creating those isn't difficult, because we have learned, actually we have learned more about writing in a language than speaking in a language, and resultantly that is why you find less students who can speak fluently and more students who can write accurately. But as language teachers or as future language teachers, you need to produce such students who are able to keep a balance between both, okay, who know the difference between languages for writing purposes and language use for speaking purposes. Okay, I think that's all for today. We are going to continue with this interacting with an audience. Okay, before we move on to, I would read some of your messages in the chat section also. Okay, tomorrow we are going to do this interacting with the audience and productive skills in the classrooms. Okay, I would like you to read this chapter as much as you can, so that it becomes easier for you when we are doing it. Okay, this girl, Rashida, is saying something. Okay, let me put this lecture to stop, and so that we can discuss what are your problems here.